Good morning, all. Let me start by thanking the Indian government for giving us the opportunity to come on this all-important gathering to state part of our case in relation to ongoing operations against terrorism in our country. As you are all aware, the war of terror in Nigeria is also an ideological one. So for this reason, in the course of my presentation, I'm going to use Boko Haram terrorism in Nigeria as a case study. By way of introduction, armed conflict prior to the Cold War era was seen as war between sovereign states, but since the end of the Cold War, the phenomenon armed conflict has transformed into the rise of non-state actors, mostly against their own government. Insurgency, which has been seen as the most common type of armed conflict, has posed the greatest threat to global peace and security in the 21st century. A few years ago, insurgency was limited to a few isolated places, such as Northern Ireland, the Basque Country in northern Spain, and some areas in the Middle East. But due to the aftermath of September 11, 2001 attacks, as well as the rise of the Arab Spring, insurgency has degenerated into a global menace. The prevalence of extreme ideologies buoyed by readily available arms has emboldened criminal and terrorist networks in their violent activities and insurgencies. Poverty and inequality is still endemic in Africa, which continues to alter the distribution of wealth. Consequently, the greatest threats to security for many people today are domestic, especially poverty, inequality, civil war, and state-sponsored violence, or transnational crime, terrorism, disease, and environmental. As we would all observe, the activities of violent extremist groups operating with support from global terrorist groups such as Islamic State and Al-Qaeda have had ripple effects across the Sahel region, bringing about conflicts and now a sense of threat to Africa's peace and stability. The most devastating effects of these insurgencies all over the world have been the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, high toll of human crisis in the form of astronomical rise in internally displaced persons, refugee influx, food insecurity, spread of disease, as well as gender and sexual-based violence. The phenomenon of insurgency in Nigeria has been evident since independence in 1960, ranging from the 12-day revolution by Adakaboro in 1964 to the Nigerian Civil War between 1967 and 1970, and violent activities of various ethnic militia such as Odua People's Congress, the movement for the actualization of the sovereign state of Biafra, the movement for the emancipation of Niger Delta, and most recent, the Jama'atu al-Sunnah Lidawati wal Jihad, popularly known as Boko Haram, which has been operating in northern Nigeria since 2002. Boko Haram activities have brought widespread of socio-economic and religious insecurity and unleashed terrible humanitarian crises in certain communities in the northern parts of Nigeria. The Northeast region is experiencing dire humanitarian situation as evident in human casualties, human rights abuses, population displacement, and refugee debacle, loss of means of livelihood, food insecurity, limited medical facilities, and other social amenities. The increasing influx of refugees and spillover of Boko Haram violence to neighboring countries over the years had resulted to serious regional insecurity implications and thus giving it international coloration. The federal government of Nigeria has instituted a lot of civil and military measures to ameliorate the consequence of Boko Haram insurgencies in the Northeast. Some of the civil measures are the Victim Support Fund, Ad hoc Committee for Dialogue and Reconciliation in Northern Nigeria, Committee for the Rehabilitation of Liberated Communities in the Northeast, to mention but a few. In the same vein, military measures are being emplaced to restore peace and security and ensure maintenance of law and order in the region. At the moment, a 3-division joint task force, Operation Lafia Dole, is operating in the northeast. Operation Lafia Dole has greatly decimated, incapacitated, and reduced Boko Haram capability to launch a sustained battle as it hitherto did a few years back. As a result of the effective military action, the ability of the insurgents to launch a coordinated attack has been greatly degraded. On the whole, the Boko Haram insurgency has tasked the response mechanism of government and security agencies. This may not be unconnected to the active support and collaboration the group receives from external sources and other prominent citizens as its expertise in manipulating the average citizens through propaganda in areas where the group operates. The purpose of this presentation, therefore, is to appraise the activities of Boko Haram on Nigerian national security. The subject of this presentation is limited to an appraisal of Boko Haram as a terrorist group in Nigeria and will cover recent activities of Boko Haram, its manifestation, effects, and challenges to security agencies and government efforts at combating the menace. In this presentation, the term Boko Haram insurgents and Boko Haram terrorists will be used interchangeably. This brings me to the aim of this presentation, which is to appraise Boko Haram insurgency and government intervention program to curtail the insurgency. To do this, I will cover the manifestation of Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, effects of insurgency on socio-economic and political environment in northeastern Nigeria, response to Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, challenges, and the way forward. Let me start with the manifestation of the Boko Haram sect. Boko Haram is an Islamic sect formed in 2002 in Maiduguri under the leadership of Mohammed as a local radical Salafist group and later transformed into a Salafist jihadist terror organization in 2009. The phrase Boko Haram is derived from a combination of Hausa word Boko, meaning book, and Arabic word haram, forbidden. So this means Western education is forbidden. Boko Haram is called Jama'atu al-Sunnah Lidawati wal Jihad, meaning people committed to the propagation of the Prophet's teachings and jihad. The ideology of the sect under Mohammed Yusuf was basically the opposition of Western education and political philosophy, which sought to overthrow the government and implement Sharia throughout the country. The perception of Boko Haram is that the system of government based on Western values is responsible for corruption, poverty, unemployment, and continued suppression of true Islam. Boko Haram, like other Salafi jihadist sects, has demonstrated the ability to master a wide range of tactics. Essentially, the sect has two basic tactical methods: individual or the small group, with focus on individualized terror, such as assassinations, drive-by shooting, and local terror, and massive concerted attacks, usually highly mobile, utilizing motorcycles and mounted trucks to attack smaller or comparatively less defended targets and then massacring the target population. In addition to these two tactical methods, Boko Haram has perfected the use of improvised explosive devices, both person and vehicular borne, including the use of young male and female suicide bombers. The sect abducts young able-bodied men to swell its rank, and young women and girls who are used as sex slaves. The target of Boko Haram attacks are schools, worship centers, recreational centers, markets, motor parks, military and security establishments, troops positions, government institutions, and public buildings, to mention but a few. Funding for Boko Haram comes from discrete external funding, bank robberies, kidnapping for ransom, cattle rustling, sales of fish, and smuggling. Initially, the sect captured some of its weapons from the military and security forces. There is a likelihood that most of its arms and ammunition come in from Libya, Mali, and South Sudan. Boko Haram also has a splinter group referred to as Ansaru. Ansaru means Vanguard for the Protection of Muslims. The splinter group broke out of Boko Haram because of the latter's frequent killings of Muslims. Ansaru avoids Muslim casualties. Instead, it actively attacks Christian worship places and government officials. Further factionalization within Boko Haram sect also led to the recognition of another leader, Abu Musab Habib bin Mohammed bin Yusuf al-Barnawi, in place of Abu Bakr Shekau, especially by Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. Al-Barnawi is the son of the original founder of Boko Haram, Mohammed Yusuf, and he is more active in the Lake Chad Basin and parts of Yobe State. Terrorism and insurgency are not new phenomena in Nigeria. These phenomena predate the independence, but they have attained a new dimension wherein international outlook based on the linkages between other terrorist groups in West African sub-region and other parts of Africa. The contemporary Boko Haram insurgency Nigeria is grappling with reared its head in 2002 amidst the introduction of Sharia law in some northern states. The set got started in Borno State by a group of educated and uneducated Islamic peoples referred to as Muhajirun movement or the Nigerian Taliban. The set's objective was to create an Islamic state first in areas around Kanama and Toshia and then all over Nigeria. However, in 2004, Boko Haram became militant in its approach by attacking police stations to seize weapons. Consequently, limited operations were conducted to halt the sex exploit, leaving about 20 members killed, while 50 others were arrested, prosecuted, and imprisoned. As a result of the emergence of militancy in the Niger Delta about the same time, intensity of the operation against Boko Haram was reduced to enable a considerable force to be applied in the region. Between 2003 and 2009, when the fight against militancy in the Niger Delta was at its peak, Boko Haram was waxing stronger and its activities were prominent in Adamawa, Bauchi, Borno, Gombe, Kaduna, Kano, and Yoba states, with presence in Kogi, Plateau, and Sokoto states. Boko Haram footsteps were also observed in southwestern Nigeria, especially Lagos and Ogun states, where insurgents who escaped from the heat in the northeast took refuge. Additionally, the sect extended its operations to border communities between Nigeria, Nigeria's neighboring countries, such as Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. After the death of Mohammed Yusuf in 2009, Malam Abubakar Shekau emerged as the leader of the sect and its activities became more violent. Between 2009 and 2014, the sect attacked army barracks in Abuja and Bauchi and the headquarters 1 division, as well as the police force headquarters, the United Nations building, and this day newspaper's office in Abuja. The sect also attacked several churches, mosques, markets, schools, and recreational centers, as well as political and religious processions across the northern states. Boko Haram is responsible for the death of over 20,000 people, including civilians, military, and security personnel, destruction of several communities, which has caused dislocation of people from their natural abode and denial of livelihood. Boko Haram abducted several girls and women, including the 279 schoolgirls kidnapped in Chibok, Borno State, on the 14th of April, 2014. The sect has also kidnapped a number of foreign nationals, including German and French expatriates, as well as the wife of Cameroonian Vice Prime Minister. Boko Haram continues to abduct and coerce young, able-bodied boys to swell its rank. Since 2014, Boko Haram has increased its use of suicide bombers, including young girls whom investigations have revealed are mostly drugged and forced to go for suicide missions. So far, not less than 80 cases of suicide bombings by young female suicide bombers have been recorded between January and December 2017. In April 2014, ISIS accepted Boko Haram's allegiance and named the sect Islamic State in West African province, ISWAP. 3 months after, in July 2014, Boko Haram declared the 27 local governments comprising 6 in Adamawa, 14 Borno, and 7 in Yobe states under its control a caliphate. In a swift military operation, the sect was decimated, incapacitated, and dislodged from the local governments, leaving remnants lurking around Sambisa forest and isolated communities, mainly in Borno State. The sect is currently engaged in laying of IED or main supply routes to inflict casualty on troops and slow down military operations. As a means of countering the defeat it is suffering in the hands of security forces, and in order to present a viral posture, contrary to government and military claims, ISWAP again stormed Government Girls Science and Technical College, Dapchi, in Yobe State on the 19th of February this year and abducted 110 girls. There are ongoing concerted efforts at rescue operations by security forces to free the girls. Now let's take a look at effects of insurgency on socio-economic and political environment in northeastern Nigeria. The insurgency of Boko Haram, particularly the adopted mode of prosecuting their objectives, have posed serious danger to Nigeria and its citizens as well as foreigners. Some of these effects include rising atmosphere of insecurity, effects on the economy of individuals, the entire Northeast region, as well as the government. The Boko Haram insurgency has also affected social and political life in the entire region. Let's look at insecurity. Boko Haram insurgency has posed serious security challenge to Nigeria. People have been denied the choice of exercising their natural freedom of movement due to fear of attack from members of Boko Haram. Although the spate of bombing has been brought under control, bombings as well as brutalized attack on innocent souls has made residents of the region to live in perpetual fear. Various intelligence reports have, however, shown that some of these attacks are not from Boko Haram alone, but some groups that have been using the privilege of existence of Boko Haram to nurse their personal and ethnical agenda through brutalization of people. It has also been established that there is a strong link between the Boko Haram insurgency and various transborder crimes, especially herdsmen terrorizing some farming communities in Nigeria at the moment. The economic effect of insurgency in northeast Nigeria has consequential effects on the citizens and the government. The insurgency has seriously affected economic activities of the residents of Borno, Yobe, Adamawa, and neighboring states. Due to insecurity, there has been a massive migration of people from the affected areas to other relatively safer and peaceful parts of the country. As posited by Umaru Ibrahim Yakubu, 97% of businesses carried out in the Northeast were negatively affected by the security problem. This situation needs to be reversed urgently to avert further loss of economic activities in the Northeast region, which will ultimately increase poverty, which could further fuel the Boko Haram insurgency. The insurgency in northeast Nigeria has drastically reduced government's capacity to deliver services and fulfills its obligation as a result of insecurity in the country. Socially, due to security checks, the people have been subjected to long queues at airports, highways, and within the towns and villages in order to forestall any form of mishaps. The activities of the insurgents in the Northeast has led to a complete erosion of intercommunal trust vital to building harmonious societies and pulling together community resources for regional and national development. This further resulted in a vicious cycle of violence, poverty, coercion, and instability. Several infrastructural facilities in the region have been deliberately damaged by the Boko Haram insurgents. These include power, education, telecommunication, roads, and other infrastructure. For most of Northeast, the ongoing insurgency has resulted into large migration of expatriates who have established businesses in this region to relocate to other parts of the country, while a good number of them have left the country altogether. The border towns that have thrived on trade and social relationship with neighboring countries have also curtailed their activities due to the insecurity. Furthermore, for a region with dwindling economic and social opportunities, youth unemployment could exceed 60%. In this instance, it is feared that such unemployment youths could only continue to be a steady source of recruitment for the insurgents. Now let's take a look at responses to Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria. There have been international and local responses to Boko Haram insurgency. Internationally, the United Nations, African Union, Economic Community of West African States, and the Lake Chad basins, and some friendly nations have taken steps to support the fight against the insurgency. Locally, the federal government and governments of Adamawa, Borno, and Yobe states have also instituted actions aimed at addressing the menace of Boko Haram. Let me begin with the international responses. In 2017, United Nations Security Council Committee passed its first resolution on Boko Haram, which was Resolution 2349 of 2017. The Council strongly condemned all terrorist attacks, violation of international human law, and human rights abuses by Boko Haram and ISIS in the region, including killings, abductions, early and forced marriages, rape, sexual slavery, and the increasing use of girls as suicide bombers. Those responsible must be held to account and be brought to justice. Friendly responses by other nations. The government of France, United Kingdom, and the United States have shown individual and collective commitments to assist Nigeria combat the scourge of Boko Haram insurgency. Former President François Hollande of France pledged to give Nigeria and her coalition partners greater support, including military and intelligence, against Boko Haram. The U.S. government also designated Boko Haram commanders Shekau, Khalid, Al-Barnawi, and Abubakar Adam as specially designated global terrorists under Section 1B of Executive Order 13224 on 21st June 2001, and placed a reward of up to $7 million for information leading to the location of Shekau. Similarly, the United States government designated Boko Haram as a specially designated global terrorist organization under Executive Order 13224 in November 2013. The United States has also continued to assist Nigerian military, security, and law enforcement agencies to build capacity to combat Boko Haram insurgency. The United Kingdom government is providing £32 million over the next 3 years to help deliver basic life-saving support, including nutrition, food security, water and sanitation, and protection of civilians affected by the conflict. The United Kingdom government is also providing technical expertise to the Nigerian government to support humanitarian response. France, United Kingdom, and the United States are supporting the military operations in the Northeast with intelligence derived from their intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms deployed in the region. The German government, through its German Technical Advisory Group, has also provided much-needed support in the fight against the insurgency. These supports are in the areas of combat medics, mobile intensive care units, training of combat lifesavers, provision of radar equipment and counter-IED equipment, to mention but a few. The French summit of 3rd July 2014 was a security summit involving leaders of Benin, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria. It was at the instance of the French President, François Hollande, who encouraged the countries to fashion out global and regional action plan to deal with the menace of Boko Haram. The leaders agreed at the end of the meeting to coordinate intelligence, share information, conduct border surveillance, maintain military presence around Lake Chad, and build capacity to intervene in case of danger. The newly composed multinational joint task force is a product of the summit. African leaders under the auspices of AU, ECOWAS, and the Lake Chad Basin Commission condemned Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria and its activities on the continent. At the AU Heads of State Summit in January 2015, it was agreed that a multinational joint task force of 7,500 all ranks from Benin, Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria would be deployed to combat Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria and the fringes of Cameroon, Chad, and Niger, where the sect is operating. The task force has since been deployed with its headquarters in N'Djamena, in the Chad Republic. The participating countries, except Benin, have deployed troops within their territories. Now, a look at local responses. The federal government of Nigeria and the affected state governments have instituted actions aimed at combating Boko Haram insurgency and ameliorating the suffering of victims of the menace in the Northeast. These actions are kinetic and non-kinetic in nature. The non-kinetic responses. Some of the non-kinetic responses of the government are the diplomatic shuttles by President Mohammed Buhari to contiguous states to garner regional support for the fight against Boko Haram. This diplomatic shuttle saw to the immediate deployment of the multinational joint task force, which has been foot-dragging since its establishment in January 2015. The president was also in Britain, France, Germany, and the United States, as well as attended the G7 summit to solicit for global support for the fight against insurgency. Also, the federal government has set up an ad hoc committee to assess the requirements for rehabilitating liberated communities to encourage internally displaced persons and refugees to return to their communities. Additionally, the federal government established the Victim Support Funds under the chairmanship of General T.Y. Danjuma to solicit funds for the rehabilitation of the victims of the insurgency in the Northeast. So far, these steps are yielding positive steps. Infrastructures are being constructed, repaired, and replaced to encourage the return of civil authority into liberated local government areas. Kinetic responses. Military response to Boko Haram insurgency started as internal security operation with Operation Restore Order 1 in Maiduguri, Borno State, and Operation Restore Order 3. Now, let's take a look at some of the challenges. Okay, to conclude, let me look at the way forward. Some of the issues we have are improvement of border patrol and policing, then denial of terrorist safe havens and sanctuary, then control of proliferation, sale, and movement of arms, tracking and tracking terrorist financing and their sponsors. Then the last is counter-ideology and de-radicalization. So in conclusion, the multinational nature and dynamism of the security environment in Nigeria, as manifested by terrorism and religious fundamentalism, have continued to generate national and international concerns. The insurgency of Boko Haram, particularly the adopted mode of prosecuting their objective, has posed danger not only to the nation, but to the international community, as terrorism knows boundaries. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I've been able to appraise Boko Haram terrorism threat in Nigeria and the federal government of Nigeria to the insurgency, which include both international and local responses to the threat. Some of the significant actions, including employment of the armed forces, enactment of appropriate legislation, and concerted response efforts on friendly nations and international community. The extremist groups operating in Nigeria and their links with foreign terrorist groups and porous borders were identified as the major challenges in the fight against terrorism. Therefore, to ensure that terrorist forces and insurgent groups are on the path towards defeat, we must improve intelligence sharing, border policing, denial of terrorist safe havens and sanctuary, control of arms proliferation, tracking terrorist financing and sponsors, and counter ideology and de-radicalization. Thank you for your attention.